Everything had survived Howard Cosell. When the world turned against Muhammad Ali, he stood up for him. He was threatened with death because he advocated for civil rights. For decades, he fought against irate fans and network bosses. He was impervious to touch. Then everything fell apart one night in September. The largest controversy in broadcasting history began with a single statement during a football game. What did he remark that was so startling that it abruptly put an end to a legendary career? You'll be shocked by the response, especially when you find out who stood up for him. On March 25, 1918, Howard Cosell was born, Howard William Cohen in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His parents were Jewish immigrants who came to America in search of a better life after fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe. Isidore, his father, was an accountant. Nellie, his mother, remained at home. They thought that the only way out of adversity was via education, and Howard's future was molded by that conviction. The family's time in North Carolina was brief. They relocated to Brooklyn, New York, prior to Howard's third birthday. Brooklyn was packed, noisy, and teeming with immigrants attempting to start over. Howard's piercing tongue and unwavering confidence developed there. Howard used words to fight, while other children used fists. He never backs down from a verbal altercation, read books, and repeated them on the playground. He was intelligent, arrogant, and always prepared to make a return. He was already developing an ego, which continued to expand. Howard began to realize the importance of individuality as he grew older. He made a personal and professional choice in the late 1930s, while attending NYU for law school. His last name was changed from Cohen to Cosell. He said that before it was altered at Ellis Island, it was derived from his grandfather's original Polish name. Family pride wasn't the only reason for the name change. Additionally, it was about making a statement in an area where a Jewish name can be a hindrance. Cosell had no desire to fit in. He wished to leave a lasting impression. Howard became the sports editor of the school newspaper, while attending Brooklyn's Alexander Hamilton High School. He didn't write fluff even back then. His opinions were forthright and incisive. He was despised by certain students. He was admired by several educators. However, he could not be ignored. He didn't hesitate to criticize subpar play or coaching. He was already behaving like the gruff broadcaster he would grow up to be at the age of 16. Cosell graduated from NYU with a law degree and a BA in English literature at the age of 21. It wasn't common. He was quick, intelligent, and motivated. However, success was insufficient. He wanted more than just a steady employment. He wanted a voice, notoriety, and influence. Although they were proud, his parents were unable to fully comprehend the passion that was fueling their son. Cosell enlisted in the U.S. Army when World War II started. From 1942 until 1945, he was stationed at the port of embarkation in New York as a major in the Transportation Corps. The obligation was enormous. He assisted in planning the transatlantic transport of troops and supplies. Entire missions could be delayed by a single error. Cosell, however, prospered. He became one of the youngest officers in his position after earning his rank at a young age. He was composed, effective, and capable of finishing tasks. That position demonstrated his ability to manage authority and pressure. Howard met a wax sergeant named Corporal Mary Edith Emmy Abrams while he was stationed in New York. Even though dating enlisted people was illegal at the time, Cosell didn't care. He immediately approached a commander and requested authorization. The general approved that maneuver, but it took guts and paperwork. Despite the skepticism of her Orthodox Presbyterian family, Howard and Emmy continued to date. Even when he was in love, Cosell didn't let the regulations stop him. In 1944, although he was still in the service, they were married. The wedding took place in a judge's chamber in Brooklyn. After 46 years of marriage, Emmy passed away in 1990. Cosell went to New York and established a legal practice in Manhattan. Following the conclusion of the war, he soon amassed a clientele that included well-known people like Willie Mays, the baseball star. He made between $25,000, $30,000 a year, which was a substantial sum at the time. However, something was already accumulating within him. He felt imprisoned even as a lawyer. It wasn't fun for him. He would pacing his office while recounting fictitious sporting events or giving speeches to jurors. Friends found it odd. He believed it was essential. He reportedly told a reporter that he wasn't mediocre enough to make it in the industry. Something louder, something public, something more was what he needed, and he got it from sports radio. Howard Cosell's first significant break came in 1953. He received an invitation from Hal Neal of ABC Radio to present a brief program on WABC in New York. The concept was straightforward. Major League Baseball players would be interviewed by Little League kids. Even though he would not be compensated, Cosell consented. In addition to doing the radio show on the side, he continued to practice law during the day. He didn't make a dime from it for nearly 3 years, but he didn't mind. For him, it was an entrance. It was a fun and lighthearted show. Cosell, however, began to discover more. There was one particularly memorable occasion. On radio, Yankees outfielder Hank Bauer made light of his manager Casey Stengel. That minor error turned into a news story. Cosell witnessed the potency of genuine, spontaneous dialogue. He came to see that individuals will frequently tell the truth if you just let them speak. That stayed with him. Later, Cosell was challenged by ABC President Robert Pauley to get a sponsor for a brand new sports section. Cosell accepted the challenge. After securing a sponsor, he started Speaking of Sports. That program would run for decades. Cosell's diligence and keen intuition were paying dividends. He was no longer only hosting. He was beginning to influence sports journalism. Cosell stopped playing it safe by 1956. He transitioned from doing occasional interviews to working as an ABC radio sports reporter full-time. Back then, the majority of sportscasters were kind. They steered clear of anything too sensitive or contentious and asked simple questions. Cosell, however, stepped in full force. He asked a player directly in an early interview if he shot too much, and his teammates avoided passing to him. Individuals weren't accustomed to that. He persisted in pushing. He paid close attention to each response, and always inquired further if he suspected that something was being withheld. That style was despised by some. It was respected by others. Because they trusted Cosell, athletes like Tommy Smith, who delivered the Black Power salute during the 1968 Olympics, chose him for interviews. They were certain that he would respect their opinions and allow them to express themselves freely. That trust was important. Cosell gained notoriety for one item over time. He was honest. He did not behave in a supportive manner. He wasn't there to defend anyone's reputation or to compliment athletes. He pointed out misbehavior. Poor performance was criticized by him. He discussed politics, war, and racism. Some followers adored him, despite the advice to stay in athletics. He was despised by others. However, he was not disregarded. In addition to being the conscience of American sports broadcasting, he was dubbed the most despised person in sports. His distinct tone and piercing rhythm made his voice unique. "This is Howard Cosell telling it like it is," he said, becoming ingrained in people's thoughts. And then he had his relationship with Muhammad Ali. He was known as Cassius Clay in 1964. However, the majority of people didn't accept his new name when he came forth and announced it to the public. TV hosts refrained from referring to him as Ali, and newspapers continued to call him Clay. The retaliation was swift and severe. One man, however, got to his feet and pronounced the name clearly: Cosell, Howard. Cosell called him Muhammad Ali on national TV. Millions of people were upset, but he didn't care. Hate letters flooded his mailbox, but he didn't care. He thought Ali should be allowed to be himself. Cosell, too, had no intention of giving up. He understood what being an outsider meant. A Brooklyn-based Jewish child who had experienced bullying because of his heritage. Cosell was aware of bias. He stood with Ali for that reason. "It's his name, and I'll call him what he wishes." That one choice altered everything, even if it meant jeopardizing his own career. It was more than just boxing. It was about courage, respect, and identity. From that point on, Ali and Cosell shared a friendship that went beyond athletics. Then came 1967. It was the Vietnam War. Thousands of young guys were being drafted. "No," Muhammad Ali said. He declined to participate in a conflict in which he had no faith. He claimed that it was against his religious beliefs, and that he would not murder anybody who had never hurt him. The penalty came quickly. His boxing license was revoked. He was expelled from the organization. They took away his title. The media largely turned against him. They labeled him a traitor and a coward. Cosell, however, did not. On air, he denounced the government's actions as unlawful and inhumane. He claimed that punishing Ali for his views was wrong. The sponsors threatened to remove their advertisements. Networks advised him to remain silent. Cosell, however, did not recoil. No one else would say what he did. He noticed the unfair treatment. Wealthy white draft evaders received no punishment. However, youthful, black, and fearless Ali was set as an example. It was clearly called out by Cosell. The hate mail came back, But this time it only made their bond stronger. They were no longer merely boxers and broadcasters. Two men were standing in the face of a storm. The magic they produced on screen came next. Ali and Cosell illuminated television screens for almost 2 decades. It was like watching boxing matches throughout their interviews. For amusement, Ali would make fun of Cole's hairpiece, chuckle at his lofty rhetoric, and swear to knock him out. Cole would dispute Ali on everything, roll his eyes and retort sarcastically. Every time, they kept the audience captivated by arguing, laughing, and teasing one another. It was more than just amusement, it was an equal-to-equal discussion. Always respectful, yet brutally honest. Cole responded, "You'd still be in poverty if I hadn't made you." Ali once yelled, "Every time you open your mouth, you should be arrested for air pollution." It was audacious, humorous, and unvarnished. Yet underneath the jokes, they had mutual admiration. They had faith in one another. They were aware that such a link could not be simulated by cameras. Cole didn't forget when Ali was barred from boxing, and nearly forgotten by society. Cole opened the doors to his studio while everyone else turned away. On air, he continued to invite Ali. They discussed his beliefs, his choice to remain neutral in the conflict, his aspirations, and his anxieties. You could see the perspiration on Ali's face, following a strenuous workout during one interview at the Houston Astrodome. Cole, however, didn't inquire about the altercation. People listened as he inquired about the man. Ali was no longer a villain. He was an individual. And that was made possible in part by Cole. Then came 1973's night. George Foreman was in the ring with Joe Frazier. Millions of people watched. Frazier smacked the canvas one round after another, and Cosell's voice could be heard on televisions all across the world. 3 short phrases yelled 3 times. Frazier falls down. The Frazier goes down. The Frazier goes down. It was unadulterated passion. It was incredulity. And it turned into boxing's most well-known call. People continue to feel it, quote it, and joke about it. Cole did more than recount a brawl that evening. He caught a glimpse of time, an instance that demonstrated that sports were more than just contests. It concerned our feelings when viewing it, and nobody evoked the same emotions in us as Cosell did. Later, Ali would remark that when no one else would listen, Cosell gave him a voice. Ali, according to Cosell, helped him go beyond his role as a broadcaster. He entered the narrative. Together, they forced America to face issues of identity, religion, race, and war. Not with fury, but with bravery, respect, and words. Arledge, an ABC executive, made a choice in 1970 that permanently altered American television. Howard Cosell was brought on board to join the new Monday Night Football broadcast crew. This was a total risk. Cosell had never played football. Even he wasn't a conventional sportscaster. He commanded attention with his loud, outspoken voice. Boring remark was not what Arledge wanted. Sparks were what he desired, and Cosell brought precisely that. This infuriated the NFL. The league had insisted on vetting the broadcast booth's occupants for years. No, Arledge answered. He refused to allow the league to dictate how his team was run, and it was successful. That first season saw a 50% increase in ratings. In addition to football, viewers were engrossed in the program during the game. In 1971, the following year, Arledge took yet another risk. He substituted Frank Gifford with esteemed commentator Keith Jackson. Gifford was a football player with a cool, collected demeanor, but he had never performed play-by-play before. Arledge had no desire to get experience. He had a trio in mind. The drama came from Cosell. Humor was supplied by Don Meredith. Gifford would now counterbalance them. It was successful. Once more, ratings surged. During the game, ABC charged $65,000 for a single ad minute. A huge amount for the period. Not only did these triumvirate transform football coverage, they changed the definition of what live sports on TV might be. They were more than just commentators. The show included them. It was more than just the games that held viewers' attention. The sparks that were flying between Meredith and Cole were the cause. There was an unavoidable contrast between Meredith's easy humor and Cole's acerbic tone. They quarreled live. They made fun of one another. They were both suspected of being slightly inebriated on live television, once in 1974. The audience was unconcerned. They adored it. People began to take sides. Team Meredith or Team Cosell. Debate was rife in living rooms and bars. Arledge also supported it. He was aware that conflict made for entertaining TV. It didn't feel like a scripted show. It was memorable because it felt genuine. Additionally, Cosell had a voice that made ordinary situations extraordinary. One particular phrase gained notoriety. "He might make it all the way." It was dramatic. It moved slowly. Cosell was pure. He described more than simply the action. He made it into a narrative. Before saying the line, he would occasionally even share intimate details about a player's life. It was a victory, not simply a touchdown. The phrase gained so much popularity that it was imitated by other broadcasters. Chris Burr included it in his ESPN act. The line still appears in comedic routines and highlight reels nowadays. It was more than simply a slogan. It served as a metaphor for how Cosell infused the booth with entertainment. However, not everyone adored Cosell. His public dispute with Dick Young, a sports columnist, went down in history. Young referred to him as Howie, the fraud in print, and even attempted to ruin his interviews by yelling profanities while they were being recorded. It was intimate. It was symbolic and noisy. Young stood for the traditional newspaper industry. Cole was television's face. They weren't merely engaged in combat. They were battling for sports media's survival. Cole retaliated equally forcefully, accusing Young of being culturally uneducated and right-wing. They engaged in a verbal duel in locker rooms, on television, and in columns. It was more than ego. There was a collision between two rapidly divergent realities. Cole had disagreements with other broadcasters as well. Among them was the legendary motorsports reporter Chris Economaki. Cosell had the largest ego he had ever seen, according to Economaki. Ratings were not the source of their dispute. It was intimate. Cosell harbored resentment. Cole repeatedly brought up a small error made by Economaki during an interview. He was offended by a simple introduction at a Christmas party. People in his immediate vicinity remarked that he never forgot slights, no matter how minor. Even though working with Cole could be draining, people constantly noticed him. His enigma was shaped by this combination of genius and struggle. Jimmy Cannon was another well-known reviewer. In paper, he made fun of Cosell's tube, and his name changed from Cohen to Cole. Cannon's attack on the broadcaster was not the only one. He asked the man directly. He accused Cosell of being a phony, claiming that he was only acting. He even made the joke that Cosell would be a roller derby if he were a sport. The affront endured. Cosell became the object of mockery due to his appearance and voice. However, that didn't deter him. Actually, it increased his notoriety. His legend was fostered by critics. He caused controversy. He was aggressive. He didn't mind either. Indeed, Cole publicly chastised the practice of appointing former athletes to media roles. He referred to it as jocrocracy. He felt that those who trained for the position, not merely those who played the game, should be hired. He was at odds with co-hosts Meredith and Gifford because of that. He didn't keep his views to himself. He claimed that former athletes lacked depth and wisdom. It was a dangerous position. Although viewers enjoyed seeing familiar faces, Cosell remained steadfast in his beliefs. He felt that, rather than being merely light banter, sports commentary ought to be intelligent and considerate. Real discussion about the ideals of sports broadcasting was spurred by his critique. With that approach, he didn't make many friends, but he did provoke thought. On TV, Howard Cosell was gregarious, arrogant, and frequently exaggerated. Behind the scenes, however, he was a reserved man who didn't want to leave his wife, Emmy, alone. Mary Edith Abrams was her true name. In 1944, they tied the knot and remained together for 46 years. "I wouldn't even cross the Triborough Bridge without Emmy," Howard once said to a reporter. He meant it. Emmy went everywhere with him. Events, games, and interviews. Industry insiders were aware of their closeness. He couldn't function without her, according to his daughters. She helped him stay balanced. It all changed after her death in 1990. His condition deteriorated. His soul dwindled. He underwent surgery to remove a tumor within a year. He permanently departed broadcasting 2 years later. Cosell's brokenness, without her, astounded those who had only seen the gruff Cosell on television. The clamor had always obscured that part of him, the calm affection and dependence. Howard was a completely different person at home than he appeared to be on TV. Screaming, arguing, and talking quickly were all necessary for the job. He was quiet in private. He was kind. He enjoyed reading poetry by Keats and Shelley to his 2 daughters, Jill and Hilary. He quietly murmured poetry on walks. He engaged his neighbors in card games. His voice was seldom elevated. He was grounded by Emmy. When he became too agitated, she was the only one who could soothe him. It was evident when Hilary claimed he couldn't live without her. Additionally, he was always softer with his grandchildren. At home, he was never the loudest mouth. Rather, he was introspective, modest, and devoted to his family. Although most people never saw it, that version of Howard was real. Cosell began drinking while he was establishing his career. Fame, stress, and occasionally too much vodka were all part of Monday Night Football. Before appearing on air on November 23, 1970, in cold Philadelphia, he had a few martinis. He mispronounced the term Philadelphia and referred to it as Full Lufia during the live show. Afterward, he threw up directly on Don Meredith's cowboy boots. He was forced out of the booth. Although viewers were taken aback, this was not the only instance. He frequently drank before, during, and after shows. According to ABC employees, Al Michaels had had enough in the baseball playoffs of 1984. He confronted Cosell, saying, "You're destroying the program." It got out of hand, and the network was at a loss for what to do. Cosell's behavior made him unpredictable, and his drinking became part of his legacy, something that fans remember as vividly as his voice. Despite his confidence, Cosell was insecure, and he was driven by a deep-seated fear that people didn't like him. He argued with executives, fought with co-hosts, and challenged sports officials. The bold opinions and sharp words were often a shield. He needed to be seen. However, it wasn't always about the truth. Sometimes it was about proving he belonged. He once claimed that only Frank Sinatra received more negative press than he did. He was always asking producers if others were turning against him, because he was afraid of being replaced. One of Cosell's most memorable moments occurred on December 8, 1980, when he received word that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside his New York apartment. He needed to be respected, and when he wasn't, it cut deep. People believed he was conceited, but many of his outbursts were motivated by fear rather than pride. Despite his reluctance, Cosell went live and told millions of viewers, "This is just a football game." When his co-host, Frank Gifford, insisted that he do so. After John Lennon was shot twice in the back and died upon arrival, there was silence as people sat motionless in their houses. ABC News verified this unimaginable tragedy to us. On the evening of September 5, 1983, millions of Americans sat in front of their televisions watching Monday Night Football. Cosell was more than just a sports commentator that night. He was the one who informed America that one of its most beloved voices was no longer with them. No one was expecting to hear that kind of news during a game, but it was a moment that demonstrated the power of television. The atmosphere was electric as the Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins faced off, but it was not touchdowns or final scores that people remember most about that night. It was Howard Cosell's comment that would end his career, as Washington wide receiver Alvin Garrett darted through defenders. "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" he asked. Cosell, a titan of sports broadcasting for decades, was suddenly at the center of one of the biggest controversies in television history. In just 6 words, Cosell ignited a national firestorm, leaving viewers stunned, ABC phones aflame with complaints, and by morning, newspapers and talk shows were tearing the moment apart. Not waiting to respond, Southern Christian Leadership Conference President, Reverend Joseph Lowry, demanded a public apology and went beyond Cosell, sending telegrams to ABC executives demanding action. Lowry used the incident to draw attention to a wider problem, pointing out the disparity between the number of black athletes on the field and the almost complete lack of black voices in the broadcast booth. The outcry quickly spread, with debate exploding on TV panels, radio shows, and newspaper editorials. The call for Cosell's dismissal became louder every hour, and Cosell attempted to contain the damage by first denying that he had said "little monkey" at all, claiming that he had only complimented Garrett's agility by saying that he moved like one. The tapes didn't lie, and journalists replayed the footage and verified what viewers had heard Cosell had said, the exact words being denied, but this only made matters worse. ABC attempted to defend him by claiming he wasn't talking about Garrett's appearance, but rather his speed. The denials didn't put an end to the controversy. Instead, they made it into a scandal. Cosell's once unquestionable credibility started to erode. When pressed, Cosell defended himself, stating, "Little monkey" was a phrase he'd used for years with no racial meaning. He cited previous broadcasts in which he referred to white player Mike Adam as a little monkey in 1972, and another white athlete, Glenn Hard, as such in 1982. Context was swiftly buried under outrage, and then there was a surprise. Supporters claimed that Cosell's record was important, that he had always stood up for civil rights, that he had defended Muhammad Ali when few others did, and that he even claimed to use it affectionately with his grandchildren. Black athletes and civil rights leaders were among Cosell's most ardent supporters. Jesse Jackson openly backed him, Muhammad Ali stood by his side, and the man Cosell had been describing, Alvin Garrett, claimed he didn't find the remark offensive, saying, "I liked Howard Cole. Public opinion had already shifted, but I didn't think it was a disparaging comment." The story stuck because it was presented by the media as a racist insult. Cosell was unable to avoid the storm despite all the help. Regardless of prior friendships or well-meaning intentions, the dispute took on a life of its own. Cole was finished by the end of the 1983 season. He left after helping to reimagine Monday Night Football 13 years ago. He described the encounter as extremely taxing. He was worn down by more than simply the scandal. He was fed up with the way that television and football were going. An era came to an end with his departure. A daring voice, Cole had once dared to criticize players, coaches, and even the leagues itself. Now it was all over with a single sentence. His presence on TV was never the same, even though he continued to broadcast on radio until 1992. His private life quickly started to unravel. He received a cancer diagnosis in 1991 at the age of 73. When doctors discovered a tumor in his chest, he had surgery in June. He was also dealing with the loss of his wife, Emmy, who had served as both his emotional support system and partner. Cosell made an effort to remain active on the radio, but it was obvious that he was losing ground. He officially retired in 1992. He fought heart problems and cancer during his last years, Parkinson's disease and several small strokes. Interviews from that era portray a guy filled with remorse. He felt as though he had been forced to leave before finishing the task at hand. The same voice that influenced America's perception of sports has stopped speaking. The world hardly paid any attention. Howard Cosell passed away in New York on April 23, 1995, at the age of 77. An embolism in the heart was the cause. Reactions to the news of his passing were not uniform. Some referred to him as a pioneer and a legend, a man who brought intelligence and audacity to sports broadcasting. Others simply recalled the final collapse, the controversies, and the haughtiness. There were scathing criticisms and gushing obituaries. While some admirers shrugged, others wept. That one night in 1983 had altered his legacy forever. Nevertheless, his achievements were remembered by the world. 2 years before to his passing, in 1993 TV Guide rated him the greatest sportscaster of all time. He was inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame that same year. He was too sick to attend his 1994 induction into the Television Hall of Fame. There were more awards. He won a posthumous Sports Emmy for Lifetime Accomplishment in 1996. Additionally, he was inducted into both the International Boxing Hall of Fame and the American Sportscasters Hall of Fame. These honors served as a last acknowledgement that Cosell had permanently altered the game in spite of the controversy.